Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be looking at the topic of how to prepare your graduates for the workplace, for the jobs market, which is something on all of our minds. If you're expecting to see my colleague, Rohan Whitehead, I'm afraid he's unavailable today, so you have me instead. I'm Dr. Claire Walsh. I am the Director of Education here at the Institute of Analytics. This webinar is intended to be for university faculty, but if you are a university student and you are worried about your own career, the advice I'm going to give you will be just as relevant to you as it will be to your teachers. You just have to think about how you can do these things yourself. So we're looking at how we go from degree to career. To demonstrate student value in the job market. This was a task I was given here in the UK when we had the Shadbot report highlighted the problems with transitioning, particularly from computer science. So not data science, this was in the 20-teens, from computer science to jobs. And many employers were complaining that the graduates that were coming to them were not job ready. They weren't prepared for the expectations of the job market. And there are some very valid and good reasons for that. It's very difficult to reproduce the circumstances of the workplace in a higher education setting, quite honestly. And that was my conclusion, that it was unrealistic to expect higher education to replicate the conditions of the workplace. But at the same time, we do need to do something. We can't just say, well, it's a problem, it's unsolvable, someone else is going to have to deal with it. And so we're going to be looking at ways that we can deal with it. We can take charge to make sure that we are in control of our careers or our students' careers. So the good news is in data science, it's been a lovely, happy upward trajectory, and it's not stopped, and it does not look like it's going to stop. We have increased supply, but we also have increased demand. The need for data scientists is at a record high. Having said that, let's not relax too much. This is the context if you are preparing business analysts or data scientists or human resource intelligence experts, financial analytics experts. There are a lot of applications for jobs within this field, and it has only got worse over the period of 2024, 2025. Not necessarily because competition has increased, but really because the ease of creating AI-generated applications en masse, bulk applications, spamming almost, means that we're now looking at sometimes 205, 1,000. When I speak to employers, it's not unusual to hear them say they get 1,000 applications per vacancy. That is not a happy figure if you're the one that wants to be found in that number, in that 1 in 1,000. So what can we do? The good news is if you're here in the UK, the field is broadly stable. We employ around 720,000 in this field. And we've added about 21,000 jobs over the last year to our field. So it's really great news. We're not contracting, we're not shrinking. It is still a field that is growing, and this is a pattern that is replicated around the world. I have figures for the UK, but if you investigate your subject, you'll find the same kind of numbers where you live. The good news is if you have a degree, graduates are also still outperforming non-graduates in the job application and hiring process. We get asked a lot, do you still need a degree? And the answer is, well, yes, it does automatically give you an advantage, but it doesn't finish the job for you. You've got to get across that final line. Employers are expecting the fastest growth this year to be in AI. So this is moving a little bit away from modeling, from statistical modeling, perhaps towards more large language model solutions. We have introduced, if you are a computer scientist by training, we have introduced large language model engineering as an add-on to our machine learning engineering career path this year. And that's a great one where there's massive demand at the moment if you have the computer skills for that. And if you're already fairly comfortable with machine learning solutions, it's fine-tuning and RAG with large language models. But there are opportunities everywhere. And particularly if you're starting to think about specializing in human resources support, hospitality and tourism support, if you're a business analyst who is not super keen on the technical side, think about where you can start to specialize. So what is it that employers actually hire for? Where is this gap occurring between graduation and employment? And we do have a gap that is recognized by governments as a problem that needs to be solved. One of the big challenges is that employers hire people for their ability to move a metric. So that means their ability to improve sales, reduce the costs of acquiring those sales, create efficiencies. There's going to be a KPI, a key performance indicator, that companies want data scientists to be able to move. They don't care if it's Power BI. They've got limited interest in the tool. It's no good saying, oh, I know how to use Power BI. Do you know how to do X, Y, Z to be able to increase costs? And they also like to hire people who can explain trade-offs. So whenever we're advising people on how to approach the application process, we always say, never create just the positives. Never produce just the positives. Every data science project comes with some kind of trade-off, some kind of difficult decision you took where you decided this sucks, this is really bad, or it's annoying, or it's creating a poor result, but this is the worst of two evils, and I've decided to accept this evil and deal with that evil. So this ability to move metrics, explain trade-offs is what employers are looking for, because those are skills that are useful in the workplace. They're looking for obviously fluency with data, so they do want you to have workflows. They are perfectly happy for you to support those with AI now. AI adoption is around about 80% in the workplace, so we're not living in the past where we pretend it doesn't exist. But they also need your staff to have their staff and your graduates to have really clear communication. I have not seen a data science post that does not list communication in the core skills required to fulfill the role. So we have to bear in mind that a pure focus on technical skills will not get your graduates across the line. And evidence. Again, AI is a reality that hirers are having to deal with because they are getting thousands of AI spammed applications, all saying the exact same thing. All of them have submitted the job specs into an AI tool, and it has generated the perfect cover letter, the perfect CV that's tailored to this job. Somehow hirers have to find the true talent in among all of this spam. Spam is an English word for rubbish, absolute rubbish. You know it from email spam. And so what they're looking for is evidence, not just claims, I can do X, Y, but an example of something that they've done. And that includes links, public links to places where that information can be verified and checked. So with that in mind, how can we achieve all of these? How can we support our students to make that bridge? So there are lots of things we can do. The first thing, of course, is to have a look at your program outcomes. Again, when I was hired to look at how data science is progressing and how it's relating to careers, I found curriculum after curriculum after curriculum submitted by universities here in the UK. The vast majority simply named a tool that they were teaching in each module. That's not an outcome, that's a tool. That's not a skill, that's a tool. So if you can translate your module learning outcomes into actual role outcomes, so you're developing analytics skills, data science skills, you're developing ML ops skills rather than we're going to be doing some deep learning with Keras, for example, or we're going to do business analyst primer rather than we're going to go back over Excel. If you can frame your learning outcomes as the roles that these students will perform on graduation, that will give their CV a much clearer message, and it will make them a stronger candidate. The second problem with this idea of just tool, we're going to do SQL, is that what's the problem? What's the problem that they're solving? And so again, you start with the problem, being able to access large data sets in the cloud, which gives you an opportunity to access vast amounts of data not available to people who are reliant on downloaded data sets. There's so much hidden data in the cloud that you can only access if you have certain skills. And so this is what our outcome is. We want people to access all of this hidden data to make the most of it, to support their employer. And the tool that they need to do that is SQL. They need to have some SQL coding or SQL. So we mirror more closely the way that an employer looks at the problem, rather than from a strictly educational perspective. In this module, I'm going to teach SQL. And if you're a student, just think about how you present your experience. I speak to your students a lot, and I hear them all the time. I have Power BI. What can I do with Power BI? That's the wrong way around. Yeah, we've got to start identifying things that you can do. I can create dashboards to support decision making, and I use Power BI. And then also, it would be very good if we could align assessments to KPIs. Students might already, they might need in the workplace. So if we can talk about quality of the data, functionality, cost, accuracy, if we can talk about KPIs rather than it worked, they wrote some code and they got a number out. If we actually challenged them to find efficiencies and they were able to reduce costs by XYZ. Employers are going to love that, absolutely love that. And it's, if we think about all of the effort that higher education goes to, and particularly the last 2 weeks, I've been advising a lot on how to use data to improve student outcomes at various national conferences here in the UK. If we think about all of the effort we put into improving student outcomes, the tips I'm suggesting here, let's rephrase the way you talk about your curriculum, is actually quite a simple and easy to implement tip. So this is tip number one. Wherever you can, stop saying we're going to do Python. We're going to do Python libraries with scikit-learn. Start saying we're going to solve XY problem and this is how we're going to do it. Oh, it happens to be with scikit-learn. And it also makes it more future-proof. This is our baseline digital capability. So this is linked to the analyst competency framework. This is the absolute minimum. And it is the minimum that employers expect. Remember, we've got a large number of graduates now coming out, quite honestly, with a very, very similar generic set of skills. So we know that the data scientists will have a module on ethics and a module on cleaning. They'll have a module on using Python. They'll have, we can predict what modules they're going to follow throughout their course. A little bit of Power BI. Every student in every university is graduating with those skills. Do bear in mind, I've just listed tools. I've just given you a list of tools. This is the working framework of what employers are looking for. And so they are looking for people, your students, your graduates, to be able to talk about their experience at your university with an evidence-first approach. So this is things like being able to identify and define a problem in the real world. Then we talk about what the metric is. What does success look like? If you are successful in solving this problem, how will you tell? What will the costs go down? Will you get better data? Will you get a bigger data set? Will you get better quality data? Will there be fewer errors? Will you reduce the missing data from your data set? And then, how did you decide to solve this problem? It's an evidence-first approach, and we encourage all of our members, graduates or students, or our most senior employees, workers as members, we encourage them to write down and record their achievements in this fashion on their Institute of Analytics portfolio. And I'll talk about that in a moment because that's your solution to your public link. Data literacy, so some of the basic things like syntax, quite often we learn the basics of syntax and we don't go back and refine it and get better at speeding up the analysis. Maybe we have one method that works, but actually we could add a little bit of C programming and really speed things up, harnessing some of the massive power of C or something like that. Joins, could we do joins more efficiently? Could we get aggregations out in a better manner? So there's just this general data literacy of not just doing the minimum, but really engaging in that syntax to be a really valuable employee. This is often where advanced syntax or just super comfort with syntax speeds up the graduate's ability to work efficiently. And so we have lots of support on that to guide people to check how good is your syntax. I know it was good enough to pass your test, but can we do a little bit more? Analysis toolkit. So then we have the list of things that we would expect everyone to have. So everyone should have some experience with spreadsheets. They should have at least one BI tool. And then depending on what they're doing after that, if you're a data scientist, you would need some Python. You definitely need to understand Git workflows. If you are a business analyst, you probably want to be looking at Power Query or one of these other tools. But it's a toolkit that is relevant to your graduates. I think that's where your strengths are. Every university does that well. Governance, of course. 80% of chief data officers say that they will put governance ahead of technical development in 2025. Governance is not optional these days because the fines are growing. We've had single fines for single incidents of data breaches in over €1 billion. So the cost of making mistakes is so high that governance cannot be ignored. We want people to be citing the data sets that they use. Data, just like a book, needs to be referenced. The person who collected that data needs to be referenced. We need to know where online that data set came from. What day did you extract it? What time did you extract it? If it's a data set that updates regularly. And we need to see students who are aware of privacy and ethics and bias and be able to explain this and demonstrate it in the job. We need communication. I've already spoken about this, but just advanced communication skills are not optional for anyone. It doesn't matter how good you are as a coder. You have to be able to explain what you're doing to someone who doesn't actually understand what you're doing, but you've got to find a way to make sense of it. The days when you could say, oh, they just don't understand it, so I'm not going to bother. Those have gone. They went when as soon as we started adding a 2 to the year, as soon as we passed about 2020, that excuse went out the window. And of course, we need them to be really good at documenting their work because in the workplace, unlike the university, in the university, they finish their assignment and that is the work on that project finished. No more. Nobody's going to do any more work on it. That is not the case in the workplace. They will work on the data set, they might clean it up, and then next year someone else will be working on the same project, and the year after. And sometimes I've even worked on data sets that are decades old. They started being collected many, many years in the past. And so for that reason, even though it's not necessarily relevant while they're completing assignments and projects, we need students who understand the importance of versioning data sets. You have the original raw data, you clean it, you create a new version. You don't just overwrite the old one. You keep the two sets and you keep them separate. You have documentation, so you explain the steps you took to clean it. What did you do with missing data? How did you handle it? What did you remove? Where you had difficult decisions, how did you do that? We have our lovely students at the moment are completing the sprint task, which is where they are demonstrating this skill perfectly. And they're all saying, but it's not obvious what I have to do with this data set. No, it's not. We've made it that way. But what we need from you, there's no right or wrong decision, but what we need from you is a really well documented account of what you did and why you did it. So if you can find ways of introducing these baseline capabilities, where I say things where you think, oh no, that's not how we do it in HE. If you can find ways of bringing these skills into your training, it really will give your graduates an advantage when they go up in the jobs market. And if you are a graduate listening, if you can find any way of adding this to your tool set, it will help you as well. Right. AI. I think we're over the discussion. Oh my goodness, all the students are using AI. What shall we do? AI is widespread. I mean, research shows 90% of students use generative AI for study tasks. Yeah, honestly, I think the other 10% are lying. I think it's 100% these days. And so that is the reality that we're working with. And it's the same in business. Business has moved on, and 80% adoption is now very high. So whatever you do, design for this reality. Don't try to go backwards. Don't try to stay in the past. Accept the fact that AI is with us and we have to work with it while maintaining standards, which of course is the big challenge in higher education. And we actually, if you have any questions, we have some guides on this. Please do send me an email at the end of this talk, and I will point you to some of the guides where if you do have concerns with integrity, academic integrity, assessment integrity, we've got some guidelines on that in other places. We want to make sure that students are making beneficial use of AI. So this is using it whilst thinking critically, while respecting the rules of research and citing your sources. So using a generative AI tool and not even saying that you've used it is a terrible, terrible thing. Using it and citing it and saying what steps you took to verify that the content was valid. Brilliant. That's a research skill. Using it and not questioning potential bias in that tool. And there is chronic bias in AI tools. If you've ever asked a machine to do anything, if you say, I'm looking to write an essay, oh, that's such a great, fantastic idea. You're so clever. They'll say that every time. What a brilliant idea. So there is chronic bias in these systems. And it's also starting to come out, and we're seeing political bias appearing. Very small, but it's nonetheless, it's appearing and we believe it's going to get worse. So use it, but discuss it and talk about how we use it, how we reference it, how we work critically with it. We treat it as just another research tool. If you can possibly, as a lecturer, devise in authentic scenario-based tasks with oral explanation and reflection, it's a pain. I know it's a lot of work to administer, it's a lot of work to assess, it's even more work to validate, trying to validate an oral-based task. You've got to persuade one of your colleagues to come in with you and double mark, or you've got to record, or it's pain. It's a pain. But your candidates will stand out. Your candidates, your graduates will stand out. One of the big complaints we hear from employers in 2025 is that these students cannot do anything if they don't have access to the internet. They can't summarize what was in a talk if they don't have access to the internet. That as soon as a student is taken out of the artificial university environment and put in a working environment like a meeting, then they are struggling. And so we need to make sure that we are giving them experiences that reflect this, that they can think for themselves without getting their phones or laptops out. And if you can do this, your university will get a really good reputation for producing candidates that employers are looking for. If you take the easy option and just let them use AI all the time, they're going to get you a bad reputation. Employers are going to see it, and they're not going to turn to you and your university and your graduates first. They will go and find another university that is getting on top of this, I'm afraid, is the bad message. So, but if you can introduce some of these tasks somewhere, it really is going to make a difference. So we're not pretending that we can go back. We're moving forwards. To be honest, we're also, there may be some solutions coming to the whole academic integrity issue. Certainly big tech have been discussing for quite some time whether they can add a watermark to output from AI that is invisible, a little bit like the headers if you're technical, the headers in a website, you don't see them, but the information's there and a machine can really easily find it. It's hidden information that the user can't see, but it's right there and it's permanently linked to this content. And we may get that actually, which will allow us to at least gauge how much AI is being used. Not today, but it may be coming soon. So let's move on to assessment. This is my passion. This is how I got into data analytics, was through assessment analytics and AI scoring and all of these things. So the challenge with assessment is that we're moving into assessment of skills, not knowledge. Assessment of knowledge is so easy to do, so easy. But unfortunately, like what is 2 + 2 is really easy to measure. Is this person numerate is a little bit more abstract, and it's harder to get an accurate measure of that. And it's the same with all of these things, digital skills, data skills. They are complex skills that have multifaceted aspects to them. And it's very challenging to mark. But wherever you can, if you can move away from knowledge-based to something that is skills-based, again, it will give your students an advantage when they graduate. So for example, I mean, computer science, computer science has had this problem for a long time, because even before AI could write the code for us, you could go on to Stack Overflow and find the code you needed, or there were plenty of places online where you could find code. And how can anyone argue that this was cheating or not? It's code. Code is code if it works. There are, of course, some differences between one person's style of coding and another, but we've always had this problem in computer science. So if it's not just code correctness, which is knowledge, which is actually quite difficult to mark, especially level 7 master's degree, just is this right or wrong, doesn't really get up to the level of standard that you need for a master's assessment. If you can mark on their reasoning, why did you do this? What decisions did you take? What were the impacts of those decisions? What alternatives did you consider? Why did you choose this one? If we can elevate it a little bit more above, does this code work, yes or no, to are you able to reason through the decisions that you took? I hope you're realizing that ticks all the boxes. That's the employability skills that we talked about at the beginning. And this is how we do it. This is how we introduce it. Um, it executive takeaways. So the ability to explain what the project does to a CEO is not a minor task. These guys have got no time whatsoever. If you get 15 minutes of their attention, you're lucky. And so the ability to actually create a one slide executive summary takeaway that explains, what the conclusions were, how you knew whether it worked or not, what metric did you use, and what are your recommendations, then that gives them, as part of their course, that experience of explaining their work to a different person who is not a coder. And I remember 10, 15 years ago, people would simply say, I'm not going to explain it. Good luck with that one. I think most of the experienced people in the room would say good luck with that. You have to explain it because AI is asking questions about what kind of business do you want, what kind of interactions do you want, decisions that go way beyond coding. And we know so many things can go wrong. This is not a surprise at this point. We've got years of experience understanding all the things that go wrong with our tools. So we have to be able to explain them. And if they can validate their outputs, if they can create this documentation that supports, this is how I got to this number, this is what I did. If they can really document their processes well, that explains why they got the result they got, what alternative interpretations did they consider, then that will help them to evidence their work. And if you're thinking, well, how do you have an alternative interpretation? Can I remind you of dog and wolf recognition algorithms, where the algorithm was 80 something percent successful at recognizing whether it was a husky dog or a wolf back in 2016, I think, when it was really hard. This was a really difficult challenge for a machine. And we were like, oh, 80%, what an amazing metric. Who knew that the technology has come so far, so fast? And we were all celebrating until some highly intelligent person at Stanford, looked at the photos of all the wrong ones and said, hang on a minute, it's not looking at the animal, it's looking at the snow or the grass. If the animal's got snow behind it, it's a wolf. And if the animal's got grass behind it, it's a dog. And it's not even looking at the animal. At which point we were all like, yeah, that's about where the technology is today. Yeah, that sounds accurate. So that's what I mean by validation of AI outputs. Did you consider alternative explanations other than your work is a genius? You have produced the work of a genius. Um, And then portfolio, the proof of work portfolio. So we developed this. We could see it coming. Um, Fortunately, we developed it just in time because the demand for a proof of work portfolio in 2025 has exploded. This is the realization that CVs are not helpful in recruitment anymore. They can be so easily spoofed, they can be spammed. Quite honestly, recruitment fraud is also going through the roof. So a huge number of those 1,000 applications, a large number will be from people who are not qualified to do the job, as in they don't have the visa to do it, or they're exaggerating their qualifications at university. Another portion of them will be scams. They will be finance scams that use the whole job application process to try to get personal data that can then be exploited, or to, even sometimes getting bank account details. They go all the way through because when you get a job, then final thing they ask for is your bank account, as well as your name, your date of birth, huge amount of personal information. So CVs have become so easy to fake, exaggerate, spoof, spam. They've become completely unreliable. And instead, the proof of work portfolio provides employers with evidence that this person has done what they say they have done. There are a couple of features. We've got plenty on our proof of work portfolio, the IOA portfolio. Our members are busy filling in their portfolio as we speak. I can show you it in a minute at the end if you have any questions about it. So the features of the portfolio, there's a back end where you can record the skills exactly the way I've explained how to record them, talking about the problem, the outcomes, the metrics, and all of those things, the decisions, the difficult decisions. And that has a breakdown of each of the skills that you need at the different levels. And it skills across all of the requirements, not just the coding. We don't actually talk about tools ever. We talk about the ability to manipulate data, the ability to analyze data, communicative ability. And where possible, we ask people to link to some evidence of it. So a certificate to prove that you've taken a course, a project that you've uploaded on the internet, all sorts of things like that. Then you present it with a one-page profile. So all of that back end is taken into a public profile, which you can share online, and you can share this with your future employers. And this is the proof of work. This shows I'm not a bot. I'm not a spammer from North Korea. I'm a genuine person trying to get a job, willing to do the work. And here's what I've done in the past. And it gives you this public profile, which we all need. Even LinkedIn profiles, some of you may be thinking, well, I have my LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn has an enormous problem with, again, fake profiles. Millions of fake profiles are on LinkedIn. They take them down every year. A proof of work portfolio has links that can be verified, and it just gives you that additional proof that you can do what you want, that you say you can do it. And the way that we've structured our portfolio is that you can't just say, I use Power BI. You can't. It shows, we encourage you to do projects. Again, if your students are members with us, please try to encourage them to do the sprint competitions. We have one running right now. It's coming to an end, I think, this week. It's a project. It does not matter if they win or lose. The fact is, they have completed a project that shows a large number of qualities to future employers that they will value. So it shows initiative. It shows your willingness to work on projects above and beyond your course. It shows that you are prepared to be competitive on a global scale, that you're prepared to put your talents out there. It's always problem solving. It's always creativity. It's always a real world based task. So we have these projects that we make it very easy through the sprint for our students to evidence these skills. And as soon as they finish participating in the sprint, this is the message we're sharing with our entrants this week. Put it on your portfolio. If you win, that's even better. That's really great. But if you don't win, you're still showing the quality of work and the effort and all these wonderful personal qualities that make you more valuable in the workplace. And then, of course, if you can put this portfolio, your profile link and your portfolio link onto your CV, onto your student profile, onto your LinkedIn profile, it's just that little bit more evidence that you're not a bot, that you are a real person who really takes their career seriously. So if your students are members with us, this is giving them the advantage they need in 2025. And of course, 2026, it's going to be even more important. Which brings us to automated tools to be able to process applications. That's what you're up against in 2025, 2026. It's really difficult at the moment. It is really challenging to go up against these machines. Automated scanning tools to be able to identify who is or isn't a good enough candidate to make it out of that 1,000 pool and into a 50 pool, 20 pool, 10 pool. We have been working a lot with human resources because they don't know what to do. They've got stacks and stacks of identical CVs, and they have no idea how to find the talent in them, which is why we came up with our portfolio. One way you can stand out is not to encourage your students not to AI generate everything on an application. I promise you, if they are AI generating an application from job specifications, so is everyone else, and they are literally identical. Identical. If they can instead include evidence, so actually speak of specifics, what actions did they take? What method did they use? What outcome did they have? So instead of saying, I was able to use BigQuery, which is great. That's a really useful tool to be able to do. If they can express it in another way that shows that actually, you know what, they did the work here, details, information. So if they can say, I automated weekly retention reports in BigQuery and DBT and cut preparation time down from 3 hours to 10 minutes. And then if they can also add like a metric or a context, you know, like this, and it's now used by 4 teams, that's more coming from work experience rather than their studies. Although you might like to use them for some solutions around the university where they could actually really create something that could be applied. Bear in mind that when these automated scanners go over, they are looking for skills groupings. So they're looking for the core skill, the tool that you used, and the domain where you used it. So make sure that you are putting those in that order. What is the core skill that you were demonstrating? What tools did you use? What domains were you able to apply that to? Tourism, hospitality, children's gaming, anything. And bear in mind, these days, beautiful CVs are not necessarily going to get you the job. Your first audience will always be a machine, so keep it all machine readable. No PDFs, definitely no PDFs. Make sure that the headings are standard. Make sure, so education, work experience, really, really standard so the scanners can find them. Avoid things like tables and anything with beautiful formatting. Putting things into columns is really problematic sometimes. The machine can't find things. If you are delivering to the UK, make sure it's UK spelling. If you're delivering to the US, make sure it's US spelling. With the UK, American spelling is often a massive giveaway that the machine wrote it, not you. That's why we're saying consistency with your spelling. If you are a UK candidate, you should be writing in British English. And whichever English is relevant to the geographic region where you're from. Right. Quality, integrity. I touched on this a little bit. As a university, I think you're probably on top of this. Make rules on the permitted AI use. Teach prompting, teach them how to write good prompts, quality prompts. Teach them how to verify the content that comes out. Don't just copy and paste. Teach them how to actually critically think about it, check it, make sure that it seems to be valid. And citation, especially with data sets. Data sets are they are protected by copyright and must be cited. Any AI output is protected by copyright. Meta or OpenAI or any of these organizations, Gemini, they own the copyright and you have to cite what comes out. If you are a teacher and you are concerned about integrity, all of you are, I know you are, I think we've understood now that previous tools which looked for exact matches of texts just don't work with AI. Um, there are AI detector options out there, but honestly, they're error prone. At best, they profile, so they often look for hints that it is AI written. American spelling is a big hint. The use of overuse of certain punctuation marks or overuse of certain words is a real key sign that the material has been written by a machine, not by a human. Now then, we have tools out there that can identify this, but quite honestly, it doesn't stand up legally to any kind of challenge. It's essentially profiling in a high stakes environment, which you can't do. Solutions may be coming. So, a database of AI outputs that you can verify against, a centralized database that will solve it. That's one idea that has been positioned. I don't think that will work. Watermarking may well work, watermarking the output so that you can track where it's being used. That will actually overnight put an end to all of this AI generated coursework. So changes may be coming. We may simply be in a transitional period. And then just think about little mini tasks. Again, this is where our sprint advantages are student members. We give them little mini tasks. You could come up with little mini tasks as well that will give them all of this evidence that we're talking about, rather than just a grade on their university descriptors. So, for example, just creating documentation, a schema, or the appropriate documentation about a project, putting it in a README document. Get them to think about KPIs, key performance indicators, success. What does success look like? Use the STAR structure. STAR is think of the situation, the task, the action, and the response story. Just write down 3 of these STAR stories with numbers. That will give your students something to put on their portfolio that will help to evidence that they know what they're talking about. If you don't want to make any of the other changes that I've suggested, these are super quick fixes. Get them to explain a chart. So here is a chart, here is one description of it. Get them to show a SQL join and how they've done it and how it works and how they've been able to use it. Simple little mini projects, teeny tiny projects that just build up their portfolio of evidence when they go to employers. And if you are a student listening, go away and do these things. They really will help you. We've got lots of suggestions for our student members coming in 2026. We're going to make this even easier for you by suggesting these things. And if you do go for a job, when your graduates do go for a job, make sure that they are targeting job applications that are aligned to, role outcomes. If you're just mass sending CV after CV after CV, if you send out 100, you're going to get 100 rejections. And at that point, it becomes really depressing. So perhaps we do need to teach them how to apply for a job in 2026. It's all changed over the last year or so. It's a completely different hiring market. Okay, this is all of the things that we could be doing with our students in higher education to support them when it comes to employability afterwards. And certainly here in the UK, graduate outcomes have become a really high measure of the success of a university. And I think this is true of any university. Where your students go on graduation says so much about the quality of education that they received with you, the trust that employers have in you. So graduate outcomes matter. It's important as well to bear in mind that you are immediately helping and supporting your students by getting them to graduate. Graduates have higher employment rates than non-graduates. The latest national data confirms the advantage on applying, but then also the benefits accrue throughout their career. So it's not just when they apply in the first place, but it's their promotional opportunities will be much faster. And especially if they are graduating in the data fields, this is a field that is going to add value over their lifetime to their earnings. And then if you do have evidence that, at the level of your program of projects that have had a measurable impact. I know I went to speak to the Bournemouth University team where I live, and they would get companies from outside to send in problems that they were trying to solve. And they would bring real world problems and have a day when every student sat down and tried to solve this problem. A little bit like a hackathon, but actually the results would feed back to that company, with, of course, the university staff overseeing it, making sure that the students were applying the theory that they should be applying, verifying and checking any information quickly before sending it back to the employer. But how amazing to have that on your CV. Make sure that you have evidence on how many of your students are getting interviews. You're likely to be increasingly asked about this, what success they have in that. When you think about your graduate outcomes, what does your scorecard look like? What is a positive outcome for your graduates? If you have that in mind, that's your KPI. We're teaching students how to set KPIs. This is your KPI. Create a scorecard for the experience of your students on graduation. And can you see which programs are delivering the best value? And if some programs are not delivering high value, then what else can we do to improve that? And as I've mentioned it already, the IOA Sprint, we do this to support your students. We do this to support your graduates. We think about the projects and get them working on it, and we get them working on it internationally. In my little discussion group at the moment this week, we've got kids from Africa, from the UK, from India, we've got kids from Nepal, Sri Lanka. We've got so many around the world participating. What an amazing experience for your students. So please do encourage them, as if they're members of the IOA, if you've signed up through a partnership model, please do encourage them to participate in the sprint. That's where we make this all easy for everyone. So just finally to recap, I saw a lovely quote from a data scientist about what it's like working in data science. And they said, well, it's a fantastic job, but it's not for the lazy, whether it's business analytics, data science, intelligence fields, financial intelligence, human resources intelligence. It's not for the lazy. If you want to do the same thing every day, you're going to start falling behind. You have to constantly move to keep up. And so a lot of our work with our student members is to ensure when they graduate, they don't hit that plateau and never improve, that their learning stops on graduation. Even if they have a gap between graduation and employment, for example, we make sure to keep them busy during that period so that they're still moving upwards and moving towards their goal. So just to recap, the things that employers are looking for, so the things that make your graduates more employable, the ability to deliver business value, and sometimes the ability to perform well on assignments demonstrates this. Sometimes we can do a little bit better to align our assignments more to business tasks. The second point is there is a minimal foundational set of skills that everyone is graduating with, and we want our students to be strong in those skills. But if they have bonus skills, bonus tasks, then it shows to employers they are the best candidate out there. Again, data science, business analytics, the intelligence fields are not for the lazy. If you want to do the same thing every day, you'll fall behind. And so the ability to take control of your career is really valued in this field. Employers expect you to be proactive, not waiting to be told what to do all the time. And so making sure your students have that proactive approach, that they're doing that little bit more, not a huge amount more, but just that little bit more, really puts them in a strong position. And that's really where we are. Evidence of work beyond grades, that they're thinking beyond, did I get an A? Did I get a B? But they're thinking, how is this developing the skills that I will need when I'm in employment? That will give them a super strong foundation to stand out in the job market today.